Welcome back. So we have one eye on the court. Like I said, at 1 o'clock, they're expected to come out. It's 1 o'clock right now, Eastern Standard Time, but Law&Crime's always on time. Unfortunately, courts are not always. So we're going to step back and look at some more testimony from the cooperating witness, Mr. Wright Jr., and some of the testimony that he gave earlier on. Let's take a look at the direct examination. So since we can't see some of the photos there, and of course we have great legal analysis here, we want to ask some of our guests what they're making of some of this. Of course, we've got Joseph Scott Morgan, and we're just joined by Matt Mangino. Matt, how you doing today?
Great. How are you?
I'm great. So Matt, sometimes forensics and autopsies at least goes over my head, and it can be a little bit too much for the viewers and for the jurors, but man, is this interesting. We've got the murder of Teresa Sievers, 17 hits to the head. What do you make of this testimony so far?
Well, you're right. It is at times tedious and difficult with regard to testimony of the medical examiner, but certainly it's the very foundation of the case. You have to be able to show that the cause of death was homicide. Clearly, as this testimony comes forward, you see the dramatic injuries that the victim received, but it can be at times a little difficult for the jury to, number one, sit there and digest all this, but also see the carnage, so to speak, that was put upon this victim in this case.
Matt, I think carnage is a perfect word to use in describing this brutal, brutal murder. We've got more testimony coming live from you in court. Let's jump right into court. Joseph Scott Morgan, since we have you here, I think it would be a disservice not to ask you more and more questions. I'm not even going to preface it. Just what am I to make of this? What am I hearing? What should I be paying attention to?
Yeah, I'm kind of a simple guy, Brian, not very bright many times, and I like to have word pictures. And one of the things I can think of, if the folks at home will essentially remember, they talked about, do these injuries look like puzzle pieces? And many times they will. If folks at home will just keep in mind this idea of a spider web that is interwoven and connected like this, that's what the doctor is having to do with. And there's a multiplicity of these things over the surface. What he has to find are the direct impact sites that he had previously mentioned. And this is going to be these kind of elliptical shaped, depressed areas on the surface of the bone, and how they communicate with the other ones. And these things literally overlap, Brian, which makes it very difficult. This autopsy would have taken a protracted period of time. He would have had to have spent several hours in the morgue just simply examining this, taking photographs, and then going back to complete his documentation vis-a-vis notes and also diagrams.
Very interesting. We're seeing a lot going on here. Defensive wounds, hinge fractures. Hey, if you want to hear more about what's going on in this case, we've got our great panel here. We've got Joseph Scott Morgan. We've got Matt Mangino answering questions. Joseph, just quickly, I know we got to go to break soon, but you wanted to talk about the defensive wounds. Can you tell us what it's describing right here?
Yeah, the doctors and prosecution is kind of guiding him in this direction. These defensive wounds are indicative of her trying to parry in a defense like this to keep these guys off of her as she's fighting away. It's, again, I always say this, it's a primal response. You're trying to fend this off. You know something bad has happened. She still has an awareness, and this gives you an indication that she is aware as to what's going on.
Yeah, Matt, the awareness of what's going on when the striking of the hammer goes down is obviously huge, because it then begs the question, who is the one who's committing that final blow, that deadly blow? What do you make of this as an attorney?
Well, it's compelling evidence, obviously. I mean, when you talk about, 17 strikes to the head with what appears to be a hammer, wounds that opened the skull so that the brain is exposed, these defensive wounds that you're just talking about right now. I mean, it's pretty horrific evidence for a jury, and it's certainly not going to build any sort of warm and cuddly feeling with this defendant based on the serious and heinous way that the victim was killed.
Absolutely. I mean, all the pieces seem to be coming together. Sometimes a trial seems like a jigsaw puzzle where you don't know where it's going until the very end. But these pieces are fitting together so seamlessly. It begs the question, what is the defense going to do? What can they do other than just sit there and maybe wait for the sentencing phase? I don't know. I don't know if our guests know fully yet, but the only way you're going to find out is by coming back, watching gavel-to-gavel coverage here, the Law and Crime Trial Network, right after this break.